here we got Joseph in the UK, pronouns are he, him, says there's mathematical evidence of a creator. So welcome,
right
Joseph.
on. What's going on, Joe?
Oh, hi, Matt. Hi, Forrest. I'm sorry, I haven't very much time left to go through this, but very, very quickly. First of all, from a Christian perspective, and I was at one stage, I'm no longer that, but it doesn't stop me believing that there is a God, if not the God of the Bible. And there's lots of reasons why I won't go into now why I disbelieve in that God, but essentially I'm with the atheists on it that it's not to my mind just make any sense. God sending someone for an infinite hell and torture for finite sins. That's illogical to me, and I wouldn't have it. So that's just not it's not viable for me. But
I would say from the outset, I don't know what your justification is for claiming that because a God doesn't seem logical to you, it doesn't exist. I mean, that's a massive fallacy right off the bat. So if you're going to say that if you're going to say there's mathematical evidence if you're going to say there's mathematical evidence for a creator, we'd need you to define that creator and then show what the mathematical evidence is. Whether or not you find various God concepts too preposterous to believe is irrelevant.
Well, I just mean preposterous in terms of the Bible or the biblical narrative. That's what I mean by preposterous.
Okay, but maybe I'm not being clear, Joseph. Your position is there's mathematical evidence for a creator. And I'm saying define creator, show us the mathematical evidence. Do not sit here and start listing off all the gods you don't believe in and why, because that could take forever, couldn't it?
No, I don't intend to do that at all. Okay, well, I'll get straight on to it. First of all, this mathematical aspect, I know there's been gone over many, many times, and I'm sure it will come down in flames at certain points, but essentially, if you look at the chance of anything, it can be either zero, no chance, up to one, yes, absolutely. And you talk about the number of cards you can draw. For instance, if you've got 10 cards, the chance you draw them in sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10, is about 1 in 3.5 million. On the other hand, if you have 100 cards, then the chance of drawing them in sequence is 1 with 158 zeros after it. So in other words, it's 1 to the 10th to the power of 158, which is an absolute infinitesimally small number. Now, the reason why I've mentioned those two is to show how the likelihood of anything happening changes geometrically, virtually, rather than just sequentially, because it multiplies within that whole probability extension. So for that reason, when you apply probability to the likes of, say, the universe, to say, well, was it created or did it just happen by random? I take the view that it seems to me that the chances of these really amazing things happening, some of them actually have here numbers with it, but they're very infinitesimally small. And that doesn't make me jump and just say, okay, it must be a creator. I'm just saying that aspect gives me concern. And then the second part is entropy, which essentially says that things tend to be declining and deteriorating from whatever their position is in the universe. So over a period of time, we finally get more and more randomness and less structure. And I assume that's what the universe is the process of doing. It started at the Big Bang, and now it's degenerating down to really an empty universe, an empty space. So that's the two things that I'm relying on, putting those two together.
Yeah, I don't.
So I'm going to start with the first one, if that's cool. You said that the probability of anything of the universe being formed in the first place, the probability of all these, I'm assuming the events that you were talking about is like the formation of galaxies and planets and life and blah, blah, blah. The thing is, when you talk about, you were correct.
An atom or something like that, things that we know are close to everyday life, even those, the probability of those happening by chance is infinitesimally small.
So the question is then, when you talked at the very beginning, you were correct when you said, you can measure things on a scale of 0 to 1. And, if you have 10 cards, you have to draw them each in sequence. And so there's a 1 out of 10 chance, and there's a 1 out of 9 chance, there's a 1 blah, blah, blah. And this all compounds. Simplifying all this down, just to use a different example. You roll a dice. There's a 1 in 6 chance of landing on any number. I can say that confidently because I can see the 6 possible sides of the dice. There's also, I could say that there's a chance that it lands right on the edge and perfectly balances, and who knows how that, but we simplify this, right? And we just say there are 6 sides. I'm looking for 1 number. Therefore, there's a 1 in 6 chance. For you to say that there's such a small chance of any random thing happening in the universe, you would need to say, well, here are all of the possibilities. And against those, I'm weighing this one. So how many different non-universes have formed that you've measured? How many times did life not start that you've measured? How are you confident in saying that it's so infinitesimally small of a chance for this all to happen unless you have actually seen any of these things not happen, unless you've actually looked at the possibilities out there.
Well, to my mind, it's not just a matter of the mathematical probability. I'm fitting that within how long the universe has been existed, approximately 13.8
No.
That's not what I asked.
So, Joseph, you came with a probability thing. Forrest responded with questions about the probability. And then you said, well, it's not just about the probability. It's about how long the universe exists. No,
okay.
I'm sorry. Either you're presenting an issue of probability, which Forrest has already addressed and asked a question about. And by the way, my notes were exactly the same. You are conflating the chance of a universe happening without an intelligent creator, a probability that I have no idea how you or anybody else calculated it, because you don't have other universes to compare it to. But that's what we need to do. We need to compare what are the odds of a universe happening without an intelligent creator and compare that to the odds of it occurring by any other method. And I don't know how you calculate either one of those, but your personal feeling, or anybody, or even the entirety of everybody's personal feelings about just how unlikely a universe is completely irrelevant. And it's not enough to demonstrate that a God.
Yeah, but I'm combining the probability with this entropy issue as well. I'm saying those two together.
No, sir. One is about the formation and the origin of a universe. Entropy is what happens in a closed system after that system exists. So you cannot conflate the two. And I need you to answer, how on earth did you calculate the odds of a universe happening with and without an intelligent creator? What is the methodology that led you to a probability calculation for a universe happening without an intelligent creator?
Okay, well, I would look at the probability of individuals within experience within our lives that we know. For instance, that certain chance of a molecule forming or an atom forming, because it has to be fundamental. It starts at the very beginning. So look at those individual ones, and then you multiply those, and you do, because you add all the ones to it. The more you add to it, individual examples of
you are making a classic.
I have a question for you. What is the probability of a molecule or an atom forming? You said you started with those and added them together. Sure. What is the probability of a molecule or an atom forming?
Well, it's huge. It's 1 in 10 to the power of 500, maybe even more.
Okay, so how many atoms have you watched not form, or where did you get these numbers from? I'll ask you this instead of doing that. How do atoms form? Could you tell me that?
How do atoms form?
Yeah, what are atoms made of?
Well, atoms are made of compressed energy, as far as I'm concerned.
Not as far as scientifically speaking. What is the actual definition of the individual nuclides? Like what are atoms made of? What are the parts of the atom?
Proton. The simplest one is a proton and a neutron. I think that's hydrogen. And then as you go through the periodic table, they become larger and larger as they add more and more neutrons.
So you have a proton and a neutron. There's a third part to an atom. Do you know what it is?
An electron.
Okay, so now go back to protons and neutrons. What are those made of?
I think that they are formed at the Big Bang through the energy release, and then
they're made of quarks. Protons and neutrons are made of quarks.
They're ultimately compressed in energy.
So protons and neutrons are made of quarks, and then we also have to factor in the strong nuclear force, which is, you could use gluons as the boson of that holds all these things together. You have the weak nuclear force that handles radiometric decay whenever these atoms break apart. Electrons are leptons, so they're fundamental particles by themselves. What I'm saying is, you're saying that you have this probability of an atom forming, and you haven't shown that you know what atoms are made of or how they form. But I've just
told you that in the Big Bang, there's a compression and then a release. That's how the universe is expanding. So we go back to the Big Bang, as it were, as the source of this is the primal energy within that actually turned into matter as it expanded.
As the universe expanded, it cooled, and energy was allowed to condense into quarks and then into protons and neutrons. Yeah, sure. What is the probability of any of that? How do you know? What I'm trying to figure out. Because the thing is, all of those things are the natural product of what happened. It makes sense that as the universe expanded, it would cool because we understand gas laws, PV equals nRT. So as the universe expands, it's going to cool off. We understand that these systems are more stable as they're coagulated together this way. So it makes sense that they would do that. It makes sense that hydrogen and probably some helium too would be the very first elements because they're the simplest elements. It makes sense that when hydrogen comes out together in a massive enough system, enough it gets together, it's going to start a fusion reaction with the proton-proton chain, forms heavier elements, and that's what we call a star, and that's where we get new elements. All of these things obey the most basic laws of physics. So how are you going to say that it's impossible for any of them to happen? How are you going to say that it's super improbable when they're the most basic laws of physics? These things are happening just because that's how they always work all the time.
Okay, so whether you're talking about as you have done correctly, about the physics of what happens and going back in time and so on, how the universe formed, etc., and also just mathematical probability, both of those need a time frame to be active. In other words, to produce this stuff at the very beginning, it needs a time frame from that time, okay? Prior to the Big Bang, and this is how I interpret it, prior to the Big Bang, there's only primal energy. There were none of these things you've listed existed, except in the
what does prior to the Big Bang mean? Because the Big Bang was the beginning of time. So what happened before time started, and why does the concept of before make sense before time happens?
Okay, so my definition of time is it's a description of a balance between energy and mass. So at the beginning of the Big Bang, there's only energy. Mass was created through the Big Bang as it expanded. All right. Prior to that, there was only energy, primal energy. Primal energy has got no time because time needs the balance between the mass and energy before it makes any sense.
So that was your definition of time. That is not the definition of time.
Your personal definition of time is not a definition of time. And you seem to also be making a very common maths mistake, which people try to do when they're calculating the odds of a particular event occurring. And so you could say that the odds of me coming into existence are based on the odds that my parents would meet and procreate at the time that they decided to do so, which is based on the odds of their parents meeting and doing that on both sides and all this. And you can just keep multiplying and you can make it look like the odds of me coming into existence, that you can make it look like the probability is just astronomically small, when the probability of my existence is 1 and the probability of a universe existing is 1. And while you could say what's the odds of rolling a dice or a single die 3 times in a row and getting 6 all 3 times, and that's 1 in 216. But that is not the same as saying, hey, we know how to calculate the probability that a universe must have an intelligent creator in order for it to begin. You don't have the ability to investigate this. This is a question that I
understand that.
And so, if you understand that you have no ability to investigate it, then how on earth did you come up with probabilities that you can't investigate and then determine that they're so unlikely that it must have been a god? That's patently absurd to simultaneously acknowledge that you have no way to investigate it and then claim that you've reached a conclusion. Because what you said was at the beginning of the call is that there's mathematical evidence of a creator, and that's not true.
It's actually that it was never my argument that it could mathematically determine that therefore God exists. I'm saying.
Okay, well then we're moving on, Joseph. Nope, we're moving on.
That's what it said in the call screen, wasn't it?
Yep, and it's what you said at the beginning of this call. But if you're saying if all Joseph is saying is that I look at the math and I find it unlikely that this could have happened without a God, well, congratulations. That's your argument from personal incredulity, but you haven't done anything to demonstrate that there's a good reason to believe in a God, even if you just suspect there's a God. But congratulations on your suspicions.
Publish them.